The chamber was silent except for the soft hum of translation devices. Kelvar sat in the witness stand, his three-fingered hands trembling against the smooth metal surface. His chitin, once a proud deep purple, now appeared faded and cracked. The sensory stalks on his head twitched involuntarily, a sign of deep trauma that every species in the room recognized. Judge Morlax, a towering centaurian with silver skin and patient eyes, leaned forward. "Commander Kelvar, you may begin your testimony when ready." Kelvar's throat clicked, the Vryn equivalent of a nervous swallow. Around him, the circular tribunal chamber stretched upward into shadows. Representatives from 7 different species occupied the observer galleries. Journalists held recording devices. Diplomats whispered behind their hands. And in the front row, sitting perfectly still, was Ambassador Jiwan. The human woman wore a simple dark suit, her face unreadable, her hands folded in her lap. "I will tell you everything," Kelvar said finally. His voice translated into a dozen languages simultaneously. "I will tell you what we did, what they did, what happened when the Vryn Empire decided to conquer Earth." He reached forward and activated the holographic display. Images flickered to life above the center of the room. Star charts, military reports, battle footage. Kelvar's hand shook as he navigated through the files. 3 years ago, I was a commander in the Vryn Imperial Fleet. I had served for 20 cycles. I had conquered 4 worlds. I was confident. I was proud. He paused, his stalks drooping. I was a fool. The hologram showed Earth, a blue and green marble floating in space. Around it, tactical markers indicated Vryn fleet positions. Our intelligence report said the humans were weak. They had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their bodies were fragile. They had no natural armor, no venom, no enhanced strength. They lived short lives, barely 100 of their years. Our analysts called them soft targets. Our generals called them an easy victory. Kelvar's voice grew bitter. I believed them. We all did. Judge Morlax made a note on his datapad. What was the strategic value of Earth? Resources, location. The planet sat near 3 major trade routes. It had rare minerals, abundant water, and a diverse biosphere. The humans had established 6 colony worlds, small outposts that would be easy to control once we took their homeworld. Kelvar pulled up another image, showing the Vryn Armada. Hundreds of ships, dark and angular, bristling with weapons. We sent an entire battle fleet. It should have been excessive for such a primitive species. Did you attempt diplomatic contact? Judge Morlax asked. Kelvar's stalks curled inward with shame. We sent them a message. One message. It was not a negotiation. It was a demand for unconditional surrender. We gave them one of their days to respond. And their response? They refused. Kelvar's hands clenched. They refused and we laughed. We actually laughed. How could these fragile creatures think they could stand against the Vryn Empire? The hologram shifted to show the first engagement. Vryn ships descended on Earth's orbital defenses. Human vessels, smaller and less sophisticated, rose to meet them. The battle began on a Tuesday, they call it. Their calendar meant nothing to us then. It means everything to me now. Kelvar's voice dropped to almost a whisper. We destroyed their first defensive line in 3 hours. We pushed through their satellite network. We prepared to land ground forces. Everything was proceeding according to plan. He paused, staring at the frozen battle footage. Then we started taking casualties. Small ones at first. A fighter squadron hit by unexpected weapons. A landing craft shot down by ground fire. A communication relay destroyed by what we thought was a lucky shot. But the casualties kept increasing. The humans were not fighting the way our simulations predicted. Ambassador Jiwan remained motionless in her seat. But Kelvar could not look at her. He focused on the hologram instead. I led the assault on their Korean peninsula. Intelligence said it was a key industrial and population center. We expected organized military resistance, yes, but resistance we could overwhelm with superior technology and numbers. He pulled up tactical maps showing Seoul and the surrounding areas. We secured the city in 2 days. We established command posts. We began resource extraction operations. Everything was under control. The hologram showed Vryn soldiers patrolling empty streets, their weapons ready, their formations tight. That is when the real fighting started. The humans did not mass their forces for a conventional battle. They hit us from everywhere and nowhere. Small groups, sometimes just 2 or 3 soldiers, would attack our supply lines and disappear. They used their knowledge of the terrain against us. They set traps in buildings. They struck at night when our sensors were less effective. Kelvar's voice grew strained. In the first week, we lost 30 soldiers. It does not sound like much, but we had never lost 30 soldiers taking an entire planet before. In the second week, we lost 50 more. They were using primitive explosives, ballistic weapons, even close combat, and they were winning these encounters. He pulled up a casualty report, the numbers stark against the holographic display. I reported to my superiors that we needed reinforcements. They laughed at me. They said I was being humiliated by primitives. They ordered me to crush the resistance immediately. Kelvar's stalks drooped further. I tried. We all tried. But the humans would not stop. They would not surrender. They would not run. Judge Morlax interrupted. Commander, you said this was the beginning. What made you realize this was different from your previous conquests? Kelvar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made the entire chamber lean forward to hear. I captured a human soldier, a young one barely past their maturity. He was wounded, unable to walk, armed with nothing but a knife. By all logic, he should have surrendered. Instead, he smiled at me. He smiled and he said something in his language. My translator told me the words. What did he say? Judge Morlax asked. Kelvar's eyes met Ambassador Jiwan's for the first time. The human woman's expression had not changed, but something flickered in her eyes. He said, "You cannot kill us all, and those you do not kill will never stop fighting." The chamber remained silent. I did not understand then. I thought it was bravado, empty pride, but I understand now. Kelvar's voice broke. He was not making a threat. He was telling me the truth. He was warning me. Judge Morlax nodded slowly. Continue your testimony, Commander. Tell us what happened next. Kelvar turned back to the holographic display, advancing to the next set of files. What happened next was that we learned why the galaxy should fear humanity. We learned too late, and we learned at a terrible cost. The hologram shifted to show a ruined city street. Smoke drifted through abandoned buildings. Vryn soldiers moved in tight formation, their weapons scanning for threats. Kelvar watched his past self on the display, confident and unaware of what was coming. This was 3 weeks into the occupation, Kelvar explained to the tribunal. We controlled the major cities, but the humans had disappeared into the countryside, into the mountains, into the underground tunnels beneath their cities. We thought we were winning. We were wrong. The footage showed a Vryn patrol moving through what had been a commercial district. Suddenly, an explosion tore through the lead vehicle. The formation scattered. Then gunfire erupted from multiple directions. The Vryn soldiers returned fire, but their attackers were already gone. That was the 17th ambush that day, Kelvar said quietly. Captain Hyun led most of them. Judge Morlax studied the footage. Who was Captain Hyun? A human military officer. Before the invasion, he was a regular soldier, nothing special in their hierarchy. But when we came, he became something else. He became a ghost that haunted us. Kelvar pulled up a grainy image of a man in his 30s, face streaked with dirt and sweat, eyes hard with determination. We put a bounty on him. We sent kill squads. We tried to track him through their communication networks. Nothing worked. He was always one step ahead. The hologram showed another scene, a Vryn command post at night. Guards patrolled the perimeter. Everything appeared secure. Then figures moved in the shadows too fast for the sensors to lock onto. An explosion, gunfire, chaos. When the smoke cleared, the command post was destroyed and the attackers had vanished. Hyun's unit did that, Kelvar said. They lost 3 soldiers in the attack. We lost 37, including a strategic coordinator. It should have been impossible. They were using inferior weapons and had no armor support. But they studied our patrol patterns. They learned our weaknesses. And they exploited them perfectly. Ambassador Jiwan finally moved, crossing her legs and leaning back slightly in her chair. Kelvar noticed and felt a chill run through his body. There was another human, a civilian. Her name was Dr. Mira. She was a scientist before the war, working on communication technologies. Kelvar pulled up an image of a woman in her 40s, wearing a stained lab coat. She became one of our greatest threats. A scientist? Judge Morlax asked. Not a soldier. Not a soldier, Kelvar confirmed. But she understood our technology better than we expected any human could. She captured one of our scout drones intact. Within days, she had figured out how our systems worked. She found weaknesses we did not know existed. The hologram displayed technical schematics. annotated in human script. She discovered that our communication frequency could be disrupted by a specific harmonic pattern. She built devices using human technology, primitive by our standards, and distributed them to resistance cells. Suddenly, our units could not coordinate. Our commanders could not receive updates. Our advantage in tactics disappeared. Kelvar's voice grew more strained. Dr. Mira did more than that. She taught other humans how to understand our technology. Soon, dozens of their scientists and engineers were taking apart our equipment and finding ways to use it against us. They turned our own weapons into traps. They hacked our sensors to feed us false information. They even captured one of our atmospheric processors and modified it to release a gas that interfered with our breathing. Another scene played in the hologram. A young human soldier, barely more than a boy, crawled through debris toward a Vrin artillery position. His leg was clearly broken, but he kept moving. He carried an explosive device cobbled together from human and Vrin components. That was Private Daehyun, Kelvar said. He volunteered for what should have been a suicide mission. Our artillery was destroying human defensive positions. Captain Hyun needed it gone. Daehyun was the only one small enough to fit through the ventilation system of the building we had occupied. The tribunal watched in silence as the young soldier dragged himself through the narrow passage. Pain showed on his face with every movement, but he did not stop. He reached the artillery position. Vrin soldiers never saw him until it was too late. The explosion destroyed the entire floor of the building. We thought he was dead, Kelvar said, but he survived. His people pulled him out of the rubble. Their medics saved his life, even though they had almost no supplies and were operating in a bombed-out basement. He was fighting again within 2 months, Judge Morlax made a note. Commander, you mentioned in your previous testimony that this was different from your other conquests. Can you elaborate? Kelvar stood and paced in the witness stand, something unusual for a Vrin to do during formal proceedings. In every other world we conquered, there was a breaking point. A moment when the defenders realized they could not win and surrendered. It is rational. It is how warfare works in civilized space. You fight until victory is impossible. Then you negotiate terms to save lives and preserve something of your civilization. He stopped pacing and faced the judge directly. Humans do not have a breaking point, or if they do, we never found it. Every time we pushed them back, they adapted. Every time we destroyed one of their strongholds, 3 more appeared. Every time we killed one of their leaders, someone else stepped up immediately. They did not fight to win. They fought to make us bleed for every meter of ground. The hologram shifted to show a Vrin medical facility. Soldiers lay on beds, injured or dying. Kelvar's voice became barely audible. In the 3rd month, my casualties exceeded our projections for the entire campaign. I had started with 3,000 soldiers. I had lost 800. The replacements they sent me were young, inexperienced, frightened. They had heard stories from other units. Stories about humans who kept fighting with mortal wounds. Stories about ambushes where entire squads disappeared. Stories about traps so clever that our engineers could not understand how primitives had built them. He pulled up a communication log, highlighting a message he had sent to Vrin High Command. I reported that we needed a new strategy. I said that conventional occupation was not working. I suggested we negotiate with the human governments, find a compromise. Perhaps share technology instead of demanding surrender. What was the response? Judge Morlax asked. They sent me a tactical nuclear device and orders to use it on a human population center. They said it would break their will to fight. They said the humans would surrender when they saw we were willing to destroy them completely. The chamber filled with murmurs. Ambassador Jiwan's eyes narrowed slightly, the first real expression Kelvar had seen from her. I refused the order, Kelvar said quietly. Not because I cared about the humans then. I refused because I knew it would not work. I had seen them fight. I had seen them sacrifice themselves for each other. Killing 1 million of them would only make the survivors fight harder. What happened to the weapon? Judge Morlax asked. Another commander used it. On a coastal city, a place the humans called Busan. 50,000 humans died instantly. Another 100,000 died in the following weeks from radiation and injuries. The hologram showed the aftermath, devastation beyond description. But it also showed something else. Humans pulling survivors from rubble, setting up medical tents, organizing relief efforts even as Vrin forces still occupied the region. And did they surrender? Judge Morlax already knew the answer. No, Kelvar whispered. They did the opposite. Captain Hyun launched an offensive the next day. His forces destroyed 3 of our major supply depots in a coordinated strike. Dr. Mira broadcast a message on all frequencies. She told us that for every civilian we killed, they would make us pay 10 times over. And she was not making an empty threat. Kelvar sat back down heavily. His stalks had gone completely limp. That was when I began to understand. We were not fighting soldiers. We were not even fighting a military. We were fighting an entire species that would rather die than submit. And they were teaching us that there are things worse than death. The hologram expanded to show a view of space. Human ships, mismatched and improvised, faced off against the Vryn fleet. Kelvar's hands moved across the controls, pulling up data streams and tactical analyses. 6 months into the war, everything changed, Kelvar told the tribunal. The humans stopped defending and started attacking, not just on Earth but across their entire territory. And they were led by someone who understood warfare better than any of our strategic computers. Admiral Su-hyun's image appeared in the hologram. She was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to calculate every possibility at once. She stood on the bridge of a human warship, surrounded by displays showing dozens of ongoing battles. Before the war, Admiral Su-hyun commanded their defensive fleet. Nothing prestigious, a peacetime position that mostly dealt with pirates and asteroid mining disputes. But when we invaded, she became the architect of our defeat. Judge Morlax studied the image. What made her so effective? She understood that they could not beat us with technology or numbers, so she beat us with creativity and desperation. She used tactics that no military computer would suggest because they seemed too risky, too unconventional, too insane. Kelvar pulled up the Battle of Mars Station. This was her first major victory against us. The hologram showed a Vryn battle group approaching Mars, where humans had a significant orbital facility. The Vryn ships outnumbered the human defenders 3-1. Victory seemed certain. What we did not know was that Admiral Su-hyun had been preparing for 2 months. She had emptied the station of all civilians. She had gathered every ship in the system, military or not. Mining vessels, cargo haulers, luxury yachts, even construction platforms. Everything that could move and carry a weapon. The battle began. Human military vessels engaged the Vryn fleet directly, trading fire and taking heavy damage. It looked like a standard defensive action, doomed to fail. Then the other ships appeared, Kelvar said, his voice carrying a mix of admiration and horror. Hundreds of civilian vessels modified with weapons that should not have worked. They swarmed our battle group from every direction. Our targeting systems could not prioritize threats because everything was a threat. A mining ship, its hull, covered in makeshift armor and bristling with missile pods, rammed directly into a Vryn cruiser. The explosion destroyed both vessels. They were willing to die, Kelvar said. Not just soldiers, but civilians, volunteers. People who had never fired a weapon in their lives were piloting ships on suicide runs because Admiral Su-hyun asked them to. The battle descended into chaos. Vryn ships fired in all directions, hitting as many targets as they could. But for every human ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. The coordination was impossible. The humans should have been panicking, retreating, making mistakes. But they did not panic. Admiral Su-hyun had trained them. She had prepared them. Every civilian captain knew exactly what to do. They flew in patterns that looked random, but were actually precisely calculated. Our computers could not predict their movements because human intuition does not follow logical algorithms. By the end of the battle, the Vryn had lost 4 major warships and 19 support vessels. The humans had lost hundreds of ships, but Mars Station remained in their control. That was when Vryn High Command finally understood that this was a real war, not a simple conquest. Kelvar switched to a different set of images, and that was when they sent engineer Tajin's creation against us. The hologram showed what looked like an ordinary cargo freighter, large and blocky, moving slowly through space. Vryn warships ignored it, focusing on actual threats. Engineer Tajin was a civilian, a designer of transport systems. Before the war, his biggest concern was fuel efficiency. During the war, he became a weapon designer. He took that cargo freighter and turned it into something we never anticipated. The freighter suddenly accelerated, moving far faster than its design should allow. It headed directly toward the Vryn flagship, the largest ship in the occupation fleet. Point defense systems fired, but the freighter's hull was reinforced with ablative armor. Missiles detonated against it, but it kept coming. We thought it was a ramming attack, a desperate last strike by a species running out of options. We tried to destroy it, but Taijin had calculated everything perfectly. The armor placement, the approach angle, the speed. He had turned a cargo ship into an unstoppable missile. The freighter struck the flagship's reactor section. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire ship exploded in a burst of light that whited out the hologram. Taijin was not on that ship, Kelvar said. He had automated the entire attack. He was already working on his next weapon while we were still counting our losses. That is what made the humans so dangerous. They could lose everything and still keep fighting. They could sacrifice anything and still keep creating. The scene shifted to ground combat. Sergeant Nari appeared in the hologram, a woman in her 30s with a scarred face and eyes that had seen too much death. She stood on a defensive wall, directing soldiers as explosions erupted around her. Sergeant Nari held position Gamma for 3 weeks. We threw everything at her unit. Artillery, airstrikes, ground assaults with overwhelming numbers. Nothing worked. She had 140 soldiers at the start. When we finally pushed through, she had 19 left. But those 3 weeks cost us 800 soldiers and delayed our advance by 2 months. Judge Morlax leaned forward. How did they hold against such odds? They knew the terrain. They used tunnels and bunkers. They rationed supplies down to individual bullets, and they never gave up. Kelvar pulled up footage from the battle. I watched one of their soldiers continue fighting with both arms broken. I saw another one crawl across 50 meters of open ground, dragging himself with fatal wounds, just to close a blast door and save his squad from a grenade. The tribunal watched in silence as human soldiers fought with a ferocity that defied military logic. Sergeant Nari radioed us on the final day. She said her unit was out of ammunition. She said they were ready to negotiate. We thought we had finally broken them. Kelvar's voice became hollow. When our soldiers entered the position, they found traps. Nari had lied. They had saved their last explosives for one final strike. We lost 2 squads before we secured the position. Nari and her survivors had already escaped through a tunnel we did not know existed. Ambassador Jiwan finally spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm and measured. Commander Kelvar, you describe our tactics as desperate and unconventional. Would you say we fought without honor? Kelvar turned to face her. No, Ambassador. You fought with more honor than we did. You warned your civilians before battles. You treated our wounded prisoners when you had barely enough medicine for your own people. You followed rules of war that we ignored. But you fought with a determination that terrified us. You were willing to lose everything rather than surrender your freedom. The human ambassador nodded slightly and fell silent again. Kelvar turned back to the hologram. My sub-commander, a soldier named Thex, came to me after we lost the flagship. He asked me a question I could not answer. He asked, how do we defeat an enemy that considers death preferable to submission? I had no answer then. I have one now. You cannot defeat them. You can only hope they decide you are not worth the cost of destroying. The hologram showed casualty numbers climbing week by week. Vryn losses mounted. Human losses were higher in raw numbers, but percentages told a different story. The Vryn were losing trained soldiers they could not easily replace. The humans seemed to have an endless supply of people willing to fight. By the end of the 6th month, morale in my unit was gone. My soldiers jumped at shadows. They saw humans in every dark corner. They heard their language in every comm static burst. We were not an occupation force anymore. We were prisoners on a hostile world, waiting for the humans to decide when to kill us. Kelvar deactivated the hologram and looked directly at the tribunal. That was when the humans stopped defending and became hunters. That was when we learned what true fear was. The tribunal chamber darkened as Kelvar activated the next set of files. His hands no longer trembled. He had moved past shame into something colder, a clinical recounting of events that still haunted his dreams. 1 year into the war, everything reversed. We stopped hunting humans. They started hunting us. The hologram showed a Vryn supply convoy moving through space. Standard formation, adequate escorts, following established routes. Then the ship simply disappeared. No distress signals, no debris field, just gone. That was the first of 17 supply convoys that vanished over 3 weeks. We sent search parties. We found some of the ships drifting and empty. The crews were dead, but not from weapons fire. They died from fear, Judge Morlax interrupted. From fear? Commander Yunji's Special Operations Unit did that. Kelvar pulled up an image of a woman in her late 20s with cold eyes and the posture of someone who had learned to move silently. She was a civilian psychologist before the war. She studied fear responses, trauma reactions, how minds break under pressure. During the war, she became our nightmare. The hologram showed interior footage from one of the derelict ships. Vryn soldiers lay dead at their posts, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. No wounds, no signs of violence, just death. Yunji's team would board our ships without triggering alarms. They would move through the corridors, invisible to our sensors. They knew exactly how to terrorize us. They would leave messages written in Vryn script. They would play sounds through our communication systems, sounds designed to trigger panic in our species. They would kill 1 or 2 soldiers and leave the rest alive, knowing the survivors would spread stories. Kelvar pulled up a message found on one of the ships. The translation appeared in glowing text above the hologram. You are alone in the dark. We are watching. We are waiting. You cannot escape. Simple words, Kelvar said, but effective. Our soldiers refused to go on patrol alone. They refused to enter dark spaces. Some refused to sleep. The fear spread faster than any disease. Judge Morlax studied the evidence. This seems like psychological warfare, not conventional combat. It was warfare designed by someone who understood our weaknesses better than we did. Kelvar switched to another file. Scientist Wusung made it worse. He was a sound engineer before the war, working on acoustic systems for entertainment. He repurposed his knowledge into weapons. The hologram displayed technical schematics showing frequency patterns and biological responses. Wusung discovered that specific sound frequencies caused pain and disorientation in Vryn physiology. Our hearing is more sensitive than humans, evolved to detect predators in our homeworld's dense forests. He weaponized that advantage. His team built devices that broadcast these frequencies across wide areas. When activated, every Vryn within range experienced severe pain. Some lost consciousness. Some died from the neural stress. Footage played showing a Vryn patrol suddenly collapsing as if struck by an invisible force. Human soldiers moved in, facing no resistance, and secured the area. We tried to counter it. We built filters for our audio sensors. We modified our communication equipment. But Wusung adapted faster than we could respond. Every time we thought we had solved the problem, he changed the frequencies or the delivery method. He turned our most reliable sense into a liability. Kelvar paused, accessing his personal files. Captain Hyun returned at this stage of the war. He was no longer leading a single resistance unit. He commanded a coalition. The hologram expanded to show ships from multiple species, not just humans, vessels from races the Vryn had attacked in the past, all flying under a unified command structure. The humans did something we never expected. They shared their technology and tactics with other species. For free, no demands, no conditions. They taught everyone how to fight us effectively. Captain Hyun led fleets composed of 7 different species, all united against the Vryn Empire. He had turned our enemies into an alliance. Battle footage showed coordinated attacks using human strategies and improvised weapons. Vryn forces that had once dominated entire sectors now retreated under combined assaults. I was reassigned to a mining colony called Outpost Kelvar 9. My orders were to hold it at all costs. The facility extracted resources crucial for ship construction. Losing it would cripple our war effort in that sector. The hologram showed a barren world with massive industrial complexes. Vryn fortifications covered every approach. Automated defense systems created overlapping fields of fire. It looked impregnable. Captain Hyun's fleet arrived 2 months after I took command. He did not attack immediately. He surrounded the colony and waited. For 3 weeks, we sat in our fortifications while his ships orbited above. My soldiers grew more nervous every day. We knew something was coming, but we did not know what. Kelvar's voice dropped. Then the attacks began. Not massive assaults, but precise strikes. A power relay destroyed. A water purification plant disabled. A communications array sabotaged. Nothing vital at first, just inconveniences. But the inconveniences added up. Food spoiled without refrigeration. Soldiers grew thirsty as water rations decreased. We could not coordinate our defenses effectively without full communications. The hologram showed the deteriorating conditions inside the colony. Vryn soldiers argued. Officers shouted conflicting orders. Discipline eroded day by day. Captain Hyun was not trying to destroy us. He was trying to make us surrender. He was showing us that he could take the colony whenever he wanted, but he preferred to give us a chance. Kelvar's stalks drooped. I contacted Vryn High Command. I requested permission to negotiate. They refused. They ordered me to fight to the last soldier. Ambassador Jiwon leaned forward slightly in her seat. I did something I never thought I would do, Kelvar said quietly. I opened a communication channel to Captain Hyun, without authorization, without orders. I asked him for terms of surrender. The tribunal erupted in murmurs. Judge Morlax called for order. What were his terms? The judge asked. Immediate disarmament, full cooperation with prisoner processing, assistance in dismantling the mining equipment so it could not be easily reactivated. In return, he guaranteed safety for all my soldiers, medical care for the wounded, food and water, transport to a prisoner facility. Kelvar met the judge's eyes. He also promised that we would be treated according to interstellar law, something the Vryn Empire had ignored throughout the war. The hologram showed Vryn soldiers laying down weapons as human forces entered the colony. No violence, no revenge killings, just calm professional processing of prisoners. Captain Hyun kept his promises, every single one. My wounded soldiers received immediate treatment from human medics. We were given food, real food, not just ration packs. They even provided us with religious materials when they learned about our mourning rituals. Kelvar pulled up his personal testimony from immediately after his capture. His past self looked exhausted but unharmed. I asked Captain Hyun why he treated us well when we had shown his people no mercy. He said something I will never forget. He said, we are not fighting to become like you. We are fighting to prove we are better than you. The scene shifted to show other prisoner facilities. Thousands of Vryn soldiers, all captured, all alive, all receiving care that exceeded basic requirements. While I was a prisoner, the war turned completely. Human forces pushed into Vryn territory. But they were not alone. The coalition Captain Hyun had built included species we had oppressed for decades. Our subject races rebelled with human support. Our empire began to collapse from within. The hologram showed protests on Vryn worlds, industrial strikes, sabotage of military facilities, the iron grip of the empire crumbling. Vryn High Command made one final decision. If they could not win the war, they would punish humanity for daring to resist. They activated weapons of mass destruction aimed at Earth itself, planet-killing weapons that would turn their home world into a dead rock. The tribunal fell silent. This part of the history was well known, but hearing it from a Vryn perspective made it more immediate. Engineer Taejin and Dr. Mira intercepted the weapons. Working together, using captured Vryn technology and human innovation, they disabled every single doomsday device before it could activate. They saved billions of lives, on both sides, because the weapons would have triggered a chain reaction that would have destroyed multiple systems. Kelvar deactivated the hologram and stood. The war ended not because we surrendered, but because we could no longer fight. Our empire dissolved. Our leaders fled or were captured. Our soldiers, those who survived, became prisoners who were treated better than our own government had ever treated us. Judge Morlax made a final note. Commander Kelvar, the tribunal will now hear from the prosecution regarding your specific actions and orders. But first, I have one question. If you could go back to the beginning, knowing everything you know now, what would you do differently? Kelvar looked at Ambassador Jiwon. The human woman's expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes acknowledged his gaze. I would refuse the assignment. I would warn every Vryn commander to stay away from Earth. I would tell them that humans are not weak because they are fragile. They are terrifying because they know they are fragile and fight anyway. They understand death in a way we never did. They accept it, prepare for it, and use it as a weapon. The tribunal chamber lights brightened as Kelvar's testimony entered its final phase. 3 days had passed since he began speaking. The observers had grown from curious to captivated to horrified. Now they waited for the conclusion. Before we proceed to sentencing arguments, Judge Morlax said, Commander Kelvar has requested permission to show the tribunal the final days of the war. I am granting this request. Kelvar activated the hologram one last time. The images that appeared showed the Vryn homeworlds, the heart of an empire that had ruled dozens of systems for centuries. But these were not images of glory. They were images of collapse. This was the capital planet when human forces arrived, Kelvar said. The hologram showed cities in chaos. Vryn civilians fled in massive crowds. Government buildings burned. Military units fought each other in the streets as the Empire's command structure disintegrated. The human fleet did not fire a single shot at the planet. They did not need to. Our own people were tearing down the Empire from within. The rebellions we had suppressed for decades all erupted simultaneously. Species we had conquered rose up with weapons and training provided by humans. Our military fragmented as soldiers questioned orders that had led to nothing but defeat. The scene shifted to show a massive space station, the last stronghold of the Vryn High Command. Battleships surrounded it, marked with the symbols of the human coalition. The Empire leadership made their final stand here. They had weapons capable of destroying the entire system. They threatened to use them if humanity did not withdraw. They believed the humans would back down rather than risk billions of lives. Admiral Soo-hyun appeared in the hologram, standing on her flagship's bridge. She looked older than in previous images, worn down by years of war but still sharp and focused. Admiral Soo-hyun contacted the station directly. I have the recording of their conversation. Kelvar played the audio. The Vryn commander's voice came through first, translated into multiple languages. Withdraw your forces or we will activate the weapons. We will destroy this system and everything in it. You cannot stop us. Admiral Soo-hyun's response was calm and measured. You will not activate those weapons. If you do, you kill yourselves along with us. And if you are willing to die, you would have done it already. You are not warriors. You are murderers and slavers who hide behind threats because you have never faced an enemy that fights back effectively. There was a long silence in the recording. Then Admiral Soo-hyun continued. I am offering you one chance. Surrender now. Face trial for your crimes. Or refuse, and I will order an assault that will end with every single one of you dead. My people are prepared to die to stop you. Are you prepared to die for nothing? The recording ended. The hologram showed the station powering down its weapons. Then hatches opened and escape pods launched, carrying the Vryn leadership into custody. They surrendered without firing a shot, Kelvar said. The empire that had existed for 800 years ended because one human admiral called their bluff. Judge Morlax nodded slowly. We have reviewed the surrender terms and the treatment of prisoners. Commander Kelvar, how were you treated in captivity after the war ended? Better than I deserved, Kelvar said simply. The humans maintained prisoner facilities that exceeded interstellar standards. We received education about our crimes, therapy for trauma, preparation for reintegration into a post-empire society. Many of us, myself included, came to understand what we had done and why it was wrong. The hologram shifted to show rehabilitation centers, schools, and reconstruction projects. Vryn prisoners worked alongside humans and other species, rebuilding worlds that the Empire had damaged. The humans could have executed us all. Under their own laws, many of us qualified for the death penalty. Instead, they chose to show us a different path. Ambassador Jiwon finally stood to address the tribunal. All attention turned to her. She moved with quiet confidence to a speaking platform. The human delegation wishes to make a statement before sentencing is discussed, she said. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber. Commander Kelvar has testified honestly about the war and his role in it. We acknowledge his cooperation and his genuine remorse. However, remorse does not erase crimes. She gestured to the hologram, which displayed casualty figures, millions of humans dead, billions injured or displaced, entire cities destroyed. Commander Kelvar participated in an illegal war of aggression. He oversaw the occupation of civilian populations. His forces committed atrocities under his command, even if he personally did not order all of them. By the standards of interstellar law, he is guilty of war crimes. The chamber fell silent. Kelvar did not flinch or look away. However, Ambassador Jiwon continued, humanity also believes in redemption. Commander Kelvar surrendered to prevent further bloodshed. He has testified truthfully, providing evidence that led to the conviction of other war criminals. He has worked for 3 years in reconstruction efforts, helping to rebuild worlds his empire destroyed. She turned to face Kelvar directly. We do not forgive what you did, we cannot. Too many of our people died because of decisions you made, but we recognize that you are trying to make amends. That counts for something. Judge Morlax consulted with the other tribunal judges. Their discussion lasted nearly an hour while the chamber waited in tense silence. Finally, the judge spoke. Commander Kelvar, this tribunal finds you guilty of war crimes under interstellar law. Specifically, you are guilty of participating in an illegal war of aggression, overseeing occupation forces that committed atrocities, and failing to prevent harm to civilian populations. Kelvar bowed his head. However, this tribunal also recognizes your cooperation, your genuine remorse, and your efforts toward reconciliation. Therefore, your sentence is as follows. Supervised service for 20 years, continuing your work on reconstruction projects. You will be monitored by interstellar peacekeeping forces. You will report regularly to this tribunal. Any violation of terms will result in immediate imprisonment. Kelvar looked up, surprise clear on his alien features. 20 years of service, not imprisonment? The humans requested this sentence, Judge Morlax said. They argued that you can do more good helping to rebuild than sitting in a cell. We agree, this tribunal is adjourned. The chamber began to empty. Kelvar remained seated, processing what had happened. Ambassador Jiwan approached him, her security detail staying back at a respectful distance. Why? Kelvar asked her. Why show mercy to someone who hurt your people? Jiwan studied him for a long moment. Because we fought this war to prove we are better than you. If we treat you the way you treated us, we become the monsters. We refuse to let you turn us into that. She started to walk away, then paused. Also because 20 years of rebuilding what you destroyed is a harsher punishment than 20 years in a cell. You will see every day the consequences of your choices. You will meet survivors. You will hear their stories. You will carry that weight for the rest of your life. Kelvar nodded slowly. I understand. I doubt that, Jiwan said. But you will. The hologram activated one final time, not controlled by Kelvar but by the tribunal's automated systems. It showed a reconstruction site on Earth where a city was being rebuilt. Human workers labored alongside Vryn prisoners, together creating something new from the ruins of war. Kelvar watched the images. He saw children playing in areas that had been battlefields. He saw former enemies sharing meals and stories. He saw hope growing in places where only death had existed. This is where you will serve your sentence, Judge Morlax told him. On Earth, helping to rebuild what the Vryn Empire destroyed. Sergeant Nari will supervise your work crew. The image shifted to show Sergeant Nari. She looked older now, her face carrying more scars. She wore the uniform of the peacekeeping forces, her rank insignia marking her as a senior officer. She stood inspecting a construction site, directing both humans and former Vryn soldiers with equal authority. She requested you specifically, Judge Morlax continued. She said you were one of the few Vryn commanders who showed any restraint during the war. She believes you can be rehabilitated. Kelvar studied the image of Nari. I tried to kill her, multiple times. She knows, Judge Morlax said. She also knows you could have done worse and chose not to. In her words, that makes you worth saving. 3 weeks later, Kelvar stood on Earth for the first time since the war. The transportation shuttle landed in what had been a war zone. Now it was a bustling reconstruction site. Cranes moved materials. Workers assembled buildings. Life continued despite the scars. Sergeant Nari waited at the landing pad. She watched Kelvar descend, her expression unreadable. When he reached her, she did not offer a greeting. She simply handed him a set of work clothes and a data pad with his assignments. You will work 10 hours each day, she said. You will help build housing for families displaced by the war. You will do it well, or you will repeat it until you do. Understood? Yes, Sergeant. Nari studied him. You testified that you are frightened of humans, that you understand what we are capable of. Yes, Kelvar said quietly. Good. Stay frightened. Let it remind you why you are here. She pointed toward the construction site. But also remember this, we could have killed you all. We chose not to. We gave you a chance to be better. Do not waste it.